But now we go to a real journalist. Swann has won both the Edward R. Murrow Award and the Lone Star Emmy Awards. He has specialized in covering the 2012 GOP presidential primaries. He's gotten a lot of hard questions into Obama and others that became international news stories. He's a graduate of Brigham Young University with a master's in humanities from California State University. And he's had the hit show Reality Check there with Fox. And then, of course, he got out of that on his own accord because they wanted to control what he was saying and doing. BenSwann.com. You can find all of that stuff at Twitter, too, at Ben Swann. And more, or Facebook, Ben Swann Reality Check. And he joins us here today to talk about his own media operation he's launching. And people ask, man, what are you doing having other media people on that'll directly compete with you? No, I'm competing with the globalist. I'm competing with the people shutting down our power plants. I'm competing with the people trying to put deadly vaccines in kids. I'm competing with the mega banks getting $85 billion a month of our money to destroy our economy. I'm competing with the collectivists and the crony capitalists that control them. And thank God there's a Ben Swann or a Matt Drudge or a Ron Paul or a Ted Cruz. Thank God there's a Kurt Nimmo or a Paul Watson. Thank God there's an Aaron Dykes. Thank God there is a Leanne McAdoo. Thank God there's a Jakari Jackson. Thank God we need more real alternative grassroots media that does it professionally, not less. Ben Swann, we're going to break in a minute. Thank you for coming on with us, but there's so much to talk about. Front and center, what do you make of the state of the media wars and our whole society and how everything you and I have talked about is now almost becoming passe? It's just like the floodgates have opened on all the corruption.
Well, I think that you have to take a lot of credit for how much of that corruption is coming to the surface. Look, at the end of the day, alternative media, you're naming these names right now, but alternative media is the driving force in exposing all of this. And Alex, you're at the front of that. Certainly, you have to look at InfoWars and say, look at the impact that InfoWars has had on the mainstream news cycle. I mean, you guys have forced the mainstream to talk about issues that they were never going to talk about. A good example of that is the ammo stockpiling by DHS. That was a story that was never going to break. You guys broke it a year before it was ever mainstream, and continue to hammer on it. And finally it comes out, that, oh yeah, well, in fact, this is happening. And Fox starts talking about it. CBS starts talking about it. And then it kind of grows from there. So I think what we've seen is a paradigm shift now where alternative media is actually driving the investigative reporting and driving the conversation, and mainstream is just trying to catch up.
And by the way, we're not blowing smoke here or on power trips. It's actually a great responsibility for all the alternative real media, the new media, the independent media. Everything we cover 2 or 3 days later is mainstream news, and a lot of times they're even forced to go with our, quote, angle. We just try to go with the truth, and thanks to DrudgeReport.com, like the nitrous oxide has really helped launch us. We do not have enough thanks to them, but I've talked to their folks. They're like, well, you cover really important news. It's real stuff, so we carry it. We just carry whatever we think is really important and people need to know. And I think the self-preservation instinct, Ben, is starting to kick in. That's why you're seeing such a rebellion against tyranny.
Oh, I agree. And I think for the most part, a lot of the mainstream apparatus doesn't understand what you're doing. They don't understand InfoWars. They don't understand the stories you cover. And so it's such a foreign concept. It's like, well, what is he talking about? And then it's like, but we've got to talk about it because people are listening.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to try to shut up when we come back and just go through whatever you think's most important in the news for a segment. Then, Ben, I want to get into a bunch of stories out there and get your take on them, and also talk about the new media operation you're launching and how folks can get behind that. Because if we don't all hang together, we will certainly hang separate. Who said that? One of our terrorist founding fathers. Going back to reporter Ben Swann, who left his very popular Fox gig because he wanted, I guess it's been undisclosed, but wanted to not be controlled. I think you said it was they wanted you to cover local stuff and not national, even though national is local. But now you're doing your own media thing. We're going to get into that in the next segment. But out of all the stuff going on out there, what do you think is most important in the news right now? The NSA, the persecution of the press, with the IRS? I mean, how much is it going to take till this changes? What else is front and center for you? Or I'm just guessing, is it those topics?
Well, I think those topics are important. I think they all kind of have the same root issue to them. So when we talk about the NSA, when we talk about the IRS and what's going on there, the fact that, we just reported this past week that with the IRS, the woman in charge of all of these agents who were targeting conservative groups was promoted. And again, we work to break down that left-right paradigm. You've got Republican members of Congress who are not holding that particular person accountable. She was the person overseeing the entire office in Cincinnati. She's not been held accountable. You have on the left, they're not holding anyone accountable. And so it's all political games, and no one's actually working to resolve any of these issues. The NSA thing is obviously very important. I think what we're seeing out of that, though, that is especially important is the fact that right now, despite all the claims about Edward Snowden being a traitor to the country and the claims that are made that he somehow betrayed the nation, we are now seeing the effect of what he did by revealing this information to the American public, the change in terms of the public demanding that action be taken. Hopefully, the American public won't back down or slow down on that. And again, I think you've got to credit alternative media with pushing that narrative forward, because mainstream media didn't want to talk about this other than to talk about the Snowden issue himself and how bad he was, and to question him personally and his motivations. It's alternative media that has really been at the forefront of saying, wait a minute, Snowden may be, in your opinion, a traitor, but the fact is he's a whistleblower under law, and this is what the NSA is doing. That's all alternative media. That did not come from the networks.
Let me go back to that question that you didn't get a chance to answer when we went to break. How do you see it playing out right now as the establishment implodes? Their answer is just a power grab. What does your gut tell you it's going to be like, say, in 5 years?
Well, a lot of that, I think, depends on how Americans respond to the claims that are going to be made over internet piracy bills and intellectual property bills. And so if we get bills like CISPA being pushed through and SOPA and PIPA, the design behind those bills, as your listeners know, it has nothing to do with intellectual property at all. It has everything to do with eliminating competition, because major corporate media want to be able to say, well, look, if we can accuse bloggers and writers and smaller news entities of copyright infringement, we can shut down their sites. And that's the goal. The goal is to say we've got to eliminate competition.
They already do that. I've had them declare they own my voice, made up till I threaten to sue people and delete hundreds of videos. I mean, they do this to little people, especially because they can't fight back.
That's right. We're releasing a piece for our first full disclosure that we've put out since we started this project. It'll be released next Monday. But the piece is about the fact that the NSA, in fact, is using copyright law, or claims, I should say, copyright claims, to actually shut down T-shirt makers who are making fun of the NSA. And then they're squashing that freedom of speech, claiming copyright infringement.
Wow. So this hasn't broke yet. That's amazing.
No, it hasn't. We'll be the first ones to break it. We're putting this out for people to hear, and it's an amazing story. When you get into what the NSA is claiming, and this is why it's so important, Alex, as you know, it's not an issue of whether or not law is on the side of those making these claims. They simply make the claims and then use muscle to force their way to control.
That's right. It's like they claim you're a murderer, so you go to jail, no trial. And they've said at the UN and at Davos, as you've said here, I think some of the audience may not understand this, so we should probably spell it out. They're going to use fake claims to shut down all the free web. And here's the NSA and cybersecurity, with what you're saying, already trying it. In fact, I've heard Homeland Security threaten people, and they tried to get a law passed 2 years ago where you can't even show their symbol in a parody. So they are attacking our speech.
And that, by the way, the parody issue is one that's very clear under law. Parodies are a form of fair use. And yet the NSA, DHS, they don't have to be able to go to court and fight for this. And that's the issue. If they're really going to fight this, it goes to a court, and that's where the legal fight takes place. And that's not what they're doing.
No. They want laws where they can just make a claim and your site's gone forever.
That's right.
Well, look, I've got articles here where they're saying arrest the guy for the rodeo mask of Obama. I mean, folks, these people are coming for our liberty. They're persecuting the press. Stay there. Ben Swann, we're going to talk about how to turn the tide on the other side. And Ben, I know you've been friendly towards Fox when you left, but, I mean, you struck out on your own here. And let's talk about your media operation. Then I want to get into some of the other big news stories that are out there and the attacks on free press, and get back into this big breaking story on Monday. Perhaps you can give us a few tidbits now, and we'll do a story that points towards it on Monday. And, you know, maybe even the Mighty Drudge Report might pick it up. Who knows? But sounds pretty newsworthy to me, buddy. And, of course, you've been on Drudge and other big sites many times. But I'm kind of perseverating here. Tell us about your media operation and how people can find out more about that and help breathe even more life into it.
Well, one of the things that we decided to do, it's called the Truth in Media Project, and the idea was that we were going to start creating, similar to what we did with Reality Check, create these 5-6 minute long videos that explain to people, a lot of what's going on that mainstream media won't cover. Now, I'll tell you, Alex, things have changed over the last few weeks as we started to build this project out, and one of the things that we started to do now is see the need and the value in being able to create some high-end quality video content just to give to alternative media sites. And the reason for that is because, as you know, one of the games that's being played with this whole idea of the intellectual property rights and these bills that we've been talking about, like CISPA, is that if you use a clip from someone's show, even though it's fair use, if you use a clip out there, you use some video on your website, your site's going to get shut down. That's the idea behind it. So what we want to do is kind of fill a void there and say, you know what, let's create this content and let's just give it away. So all these alternative media sites, and we've been setting up with a lot of them, is to say, you know what, you guys can just have it. Just don't edit it apart. Don't cut it down. Don't, take license and say, well, we'll run this little piece so that things are out of context. But it's, we're going to give it away for free. And that's been kind of the idea over the last few weeks as we've been building this up. So we're really excited about that. Everything that we have, we'd love to give to you guys over at InfoWars and say, if you want to use it, great. If not, that's fine too.
No, we're going to use it. Absolutely. Great plan. We talked about this off air too. And I think you're doing the right thing. I instinctively always said everything I've put out is copyright. I still retain the copyright, so they can't change it or alter it or twist it, or then say, okay, now we own it, you don't. You have to retain something as you're doing, but as long as it's not taken out of context and it's for nonprofit educational purposes or even fair use, clearly by the guidelines that everybody knows, then you can use everything we've done, and that has been one reason we've been so successful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I really respect the fact that you're a guy who obviously you've built up a media empire of your own, but I've never seen you competitive with other people, and I've always seen you working to build up other people, and that's fantastic. And that's what we want to do too. We want to build up other sites who say, listen, we're video poor right now. We don't have the ability to create this stuff. We're creating stuff in Chicago. We're shooting it. It's the stuff that we're putting out. I mean, candidly, it's better than what a lot of networks are putting out. And so we're very excited about the quality of what we're about to put out. But then we say, look, how do we use this? How is it most beneficial to people? Well, we get it out to the public. We share it. We give it away for free. We place it on streaming sites. But we don't see it as hey, this is Ben's stuff, and Ben's got to make his stuff so that he can build up his kind of empire over here. It's not that at all. And I know you understand that philosophy, but that's essentially what we're trying to do, is we're trying to augment where there's a lot of bloggers out there, there's a lot of writers, there's a lot of people putting out good content. How do we augment the video side of it, where so far it's been kind of a struggle, especially for smaller sites where video, as you know, is expensive to produce?
Well, that's our plan. That's why I've hired a bunch of reporters. We're almost done with our studio, looking at the different satellite uplinks and all of it. And we're just going to put it basically free to air, even to the establishment media, and they're going to end up using a lot of what we develop. We're actually developing reporter contacts and people that just want to get their info out, who then will upload to us stuff that they've authorized us to use. We'll put their site as consideration as well on there. And that's actually my plan, is to not just share our info, but to become a nexus point to then magnify what everybody else is doing. Because that's what I'm looking for, is to destroy the globalist. I want my freedom back. I want to dig these globalists out of their rat holes, who are openly persecuting. I mean, it came out today with Snowden going, oh yeah, no, they target the press to know what the press is going to do. Well, that's already come out. I mean, we have them illegally spying on us and to frustrate the press and sending the IRS after pro-life groups saying you can't protest dead children. I mean, this is authoritarianism. And the answer is to just have everybody, I mean, even if you don't have a lot of skills, start your own weekly YouTube blog where you talk about stuff. Start a newsletter. Start a local paper. Go get a local weekend radio show. Go do an access show. Everybody has got to do something now.
Right. Well, and as more voices come out, all of a sudden the stuff that right now people would call fringe is no longer fringe. It becomes mainstream. And as we've been talking about, mainstream starts chasing that because they realize there's a huge audience for it. And it's not an audience because you're building off sensationalism. It's an audience because you're building off truth. And when there's a lack or an absence of truth in mainstream, people are going to find it. They're going to seek it out. And so we've seen that. And we see this happening even with, this latest attempt by the Senate, Dianne Feinstein, trying to redefine, who is really a journalist. And if you don't work for a paid organization, if you don't work for a corporation, then suddenly you're no longer a journalist and not protected under SHIELD laws. I mean, that is something that every American should be aware of, because what you're essentially saying is we will decide who is a journalist, therefore who gets protection.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Dianne Feinstein has jumped the shark here.